quite recently, in this last century, that they've improved things, and they showed a wreck of a ship that was only like 1980 something.
Yeah.
And how the lifeboat went down with it, because I think there was a certain problem with I can't remember now. I can't remember.
Is that right, Anne? It's interesting.
They've made a new boat, and every time something like this happens, they learn a lot from it,
Yeah.
and hope it doesn't happen again.
I think.
Oh yeah, that was it. It was the people on board on the coast up until recently have not been able to interfere in what the lifeboat or the Coast Guard want. And now they are able to. They can see the situation, and they can intervene, and they can say, no, you must do this, and so that it was really interesting. But anyway, I did have a chat with Robert today as well.
Yeah.
He'll be coming for the next few months, really. Like you said, weeks, really. And he'll still be the member, but he won't be coming for a few weeks because his wife's not well at all. So he'll be dropping out just so that we know where we are, really.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Anne. That's fine. Yeah, that I think it was interesting about Shipwrecks, what you've had to say, and obviously give my thoughts with Robert. But the shipwreck thing is really interesting. I always like looking at shipwrecks and what they can tell us, especially with what Carl's done with us in the past. I think going to Belfast quite recently and looking at all the just looking at how they're able to find the Titanic and what's being left on the floor, and it's just a glimpse to the past, and it's definitely interesting. And that's a more recent discovery to the Sinan shipwreck that I'm thinking of, which was medieval.
Well, these recent ones are, they're still interesting because how did they happen, and how can they avoid them, but most of the worst thing is the weather. At the end of the day, it's dreadful. Weather we got around the coast.
It's treacherous out there. It's cold as well and miserable. So I think it's been miserable inland as well because of all the rain. It's not. I've been dreading
fog and rain and let's forget about winter.
Yes. Thank you, Anne. Richard, anything that you'd like to share with us from the first week? Yeah. Sorry, my mind went then.
Really. Saving a few interesting things on the TV with the.
Digging for Britain's been good.
Oh yeah. Are we following them or are they following us?
Richard, it's definitely some fantastic stuff on the TV, and I think they've put a few things up on Amazon Prime. One of the few things that they've got on there is also looking at experimental archaeology. I can't remember the name of the program, but it's experimental archaeology, and they go through different time periods and they look at it through that lens. But I think it's also on the BBC iPlayer. So I'll try and find the name of that because it's quite interesting how you have historians and archaeologists looking at the evidence and they're trying to put it into practice. And it's always interesting to see things like that come to life. Gives you a better understanding. So I'll try and find that because we always like a good thing to watch sometimes, especially with this weather.
Yeah,
like I said,
you don't really want to be out and about.
No, definitely. The poor dogs, I took them for a quick walk the other day and I was like, nope, back in. They probably felt a bit upset, but they've had their walks and I want to get in, no messing around with balls and twigs, etc. But thank you, Richard. Pat, any news this week?
No. Thank you. Sorry.
That's all right. I think one of my favourite highlights this week, and it came out quite early this week. Last year in February, they found what they described as Rutland's sea monster, which is this dinosaur fossil that they had found in Rutland. Is about they call them sea dragons, and it really does throw me off, but they're not. They look like dolphins in a way. If I can get the photo up a bit. Is the photo gone? Oh, I have the photo the other day because it looked scary. I'll try and find it, but they look like dolphins, but they're a bit aggressive. But the photo of the fossil is here and is about 33 foot in length.
Yeah. And there's a man there.
Yeah, and he's lying down. And the skull in itself weighs a ton, which is absolutely fantastic. And another interesting thing about this is that they normally see this species around Germany. To find it here is quite unique and a fantastic find. So this was found last February, and it's only now they're talking about it, and they're able to provide information that in the stomach they found either what would have been maybe the last meal, or the fact that this could have been a pregnant animal. So they're not really sure, but it's very clear. If you have a look online, you can see all the bones, they're perfect, and a fantastic find. Fossil finders go their whole lives about finding something like this. So to find that, I think this individual who's found him must be really proud, because this is thought to be the largest UK example of a predator that roamed the seas at the time of the dinosaurs. And you can just imagine how excited you'd be just finding that. So if I go into the class now today, you can see where it is. So I said we do Caerwent today. So this is historic Wales, and I do have a tendency to bring it back to the medieval period. So I thought if I go for my other love, which was the Romans and Caerwent. If I don't know what's going on here. Something's come up. Get rid of it. Just press the X and hope it's okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
That's fine. That is absolutely fine. And you can see everything that's on the screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. I don't know what that pop-up was then. We'll ignore it. So Caerwent, I know a lot of people have an interest in Caerwent, and I definitely think this is an interesting area, because I think it tells us more than just the Romans, but I do think it tells us a little bit of the locals who live there, and just the trade that's going on. I do like a bit of trade thrown in there. So we will be looking at some examples of artifacts that they've found and what that can tell us about what's being brought up. But Caerwent is rich, and it's rich in the evidence, and the evidence is telling us so much about what it's like to live in the Roman era in this location. Having a look online, there's a lot of information, but at the same time it's just one of those things where you have to be careful with what you search, because some of the things that I was searching, clearly I was in another land a few days ago and couldn't really think of what to type in. I was just typing in rubbish, and then I realised that's not what we call it. So obviously we'll be looking at certain areas of this town and see the former basilica, looking at the temple, and even looking at what the plan would look like as a whole. And just looking at the archaeology that they found in a small area, it does make you wonder what else was, what was the whole area like? What's also lying underground? It just makes me really, it just makes me want to sort of uproot everything, really, because you just think this is definitely an area of importance, and we need to try and find out as much as we can as possible. And I think this is definitely a fantastic area because we do have an example of mosaics here, and they're beautiful as well. So I wanted to have a look at that. Obviously, we have Rutland, and a lot of people have talked about Rutland's mosaics and who made them, and who had commissioned them. And I think that's just something that's important to look at here as well. And I think with Caerwent, we're having a view of this mixture as well. What I'll show you about some of the artifacts, one in particular, is that you see this mixture between this local way of life and this Roman way of life, especially in beliefs. And we'll have a little look at that, and obviously looking at loads of books that you can find. Amazon are best for Roman books. Found that places like Waterstones are very limited, but there's a few books I've got. Obviously we have Carl's, and I have 2 of them, and I also have another book as well that looks at some artifacts that have come from the museums, etc. And when you look at all these books, it's interesting to see the difference in theories and perspectives, and I think that's important. I'm one of those people that like to hear all the theories, and then I overwhelm myself with the theories and I can't pick a side. But I definitely get a sense here that this isn't just fully Roman. There's a hint of a local way of life, and there is evidence to suggest that maybe these areas carried on past the Roman period, but just fell out of use. So the first image here is just a plan. So you can see parts of the gate today as well, and you can see that there was a marketplace there. There was workshops there. There was a temple. There's a house. This is what they found so far. The rest of it they haven't, and it just makes you wonder what more could be there. But this is around about the 300s, so they're dating everything. And you can see that the roads that are going on here have provided some good connections with other areas, especially Ischia in Caerleon. And you can see how there's finds that are being found that shows that there's a connection to this site. So the name of this site is Venta Silarum, I think that's how it's said. That was the name of Caerwent at the time, and I like the fact that in South Wales there are an echo of the Roman era. Obviously living in Cardiff, I see that with Cardiff Castle, and I think that's definitely something interesting to look at, is the Roman evidence in Cardiff. Carl has put in his book, it's known as the Lanedin, I can't remember the name, but the Lanedin find, they found a grey pottery jug full of coins, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that maybe pottery is being created around here as well. And looking at this site as well, I think you definitely see how there's an equation going on here, and you can see that this was definitely a place of strategic importance. And a lot of people have talked about the tribe that lived here. So the Silures, which were the local tribe, they believe that this was created to establish power, but it was also to ensure that they were protected as well from any attacks, because the relationship with this local tribe was never a peaceful one. It did start off quite obviously they're protecting the land, and you have these Romans coming here, you are going to be defensive. So obviously there wasn't a good start to the relationship. They do slowly become Romanized, but this would have been a tribe that was occupying what is now obviously southeast Wales. And the information about this, we can see a lot of information of them having this usually curly hair as well. You have a lot of discussions on how they crossed over from Spain, and so that's why we have this look to them. And you can definitely see how there's an information about the way they look. A lot of people are comparing them to the Spanish as well in some of the information. Oh. But there was a Roman, not Roman, an Iron Age hill fort that's near Caerwent as well. So obviously there was local people living by, and they were trading in this area. They are going to benefit, I think, as much as there was a resistance, you are going to be cautious. And eventually they realised that they could leave their mark on the Romans just as much as the Romans can leave a mark on us. So they traded. They also took part into this life, and I think at the temple is something that's important, that suggests that the local people left their mark in some sort of way. And we definitely see how there was they were a group of people that had these shared cultural values rather than a centralized society. And so seeing something like this was new, and definitely something that I think provided a new chapter for the way the local people lived. And I think it definitely love the example that Karl has always given about a relationship where you learn from each relationship, you take something from that relationship to better yourself for the next relationship. And I think that's what's happened here. And we definitely do have evidence of these Iron Age hill forts then being important in terms of being almost like a centre where they could store things and ensure that everything was protected, just like we see here with this. And we also have evidence of Iron Age hill forts actually having rectangular houses where they're taking on this Roman way of life. So I think we have this all around us, that there's just as much of an effect on them as it is us. So there was a fierce resistance to the Roman forces at this time. So around about 48 AD, they resisted the Roman conquest as much as they could. And you see how there was almost like a very strong defense of the Romans. It's almost like the tribe was almost taken back. I think they didn't really, this first time interacting with these people and seeing this is definitely a learning curve. So you definitely see how some of them flee further east. But the first attack on the Welsh tribes was around about 48 AD. And you definitely see how this was a conflict that had definitely gone on, is something that's part of our history but very little documented. But we see how there's definitely this guerrilla warfare going on, how they're trying to push the Romans away as much as they could. And I think that's why we see towns like this in Cardiff and Caerleon and Caerwent, because the Romans are trying to provide so much more protection than what they can give than just fighting. And so having this was allowing them to have this symbol of strength. And I think this is why we see a lot of Norman structures in a Roman site as well, because I think they take on the fact that they understood that the Romans had this protection of these strong walls, that they were able to resist, and they were able to slowly integrate into society. And I think the Normans in a way sort of followed wherever these Romans remains were, but the Romans really understood it. And I think it's definitely important to have a look at this, because the locals weren't, let's just say, having guerrilla warfare, and they didn't know what they were doing. I think the Romans were also learning just as much as well. And there is discussion about how these individuals, this tribe, took some Roman prisoners as hostage to their neighbouring tribes in order to encourage this resistance. It's almost like a morale. Look, we've got some Romans, we can keep resisting. This went on for a while. But this was then, to keep this local opposition, we see this Roman administration being implemented. So you have these fortresses, you also have these walls keeping people out as well. And by 75 AD, this is when you see Caerwent being established. This was a Romanized town, so there wasn't, it was Isca, which is in Caerleon, and then you also have other fortresses, but Isca was the legionary fortress. This was just a town. I think this is where we see the trades in, and it takes me back to when I was a child, because when I was about, I think 7, we learned about what they called the Celt. It was a Celt topic, which I'm sure Karl would hate me right now for saying, but it was a Celtic topic, and it was definitely interesting because they made it all about the local people when we were younger. And it was this interactive website on the BBC where you could take part, and they would tell you about the Roman town, what it was like being a local person in a Roman town. And they would talk about the smells, how there would be people cooking, because they have found in these workshops some sort of oven, and they talk about how that you have these great big buildings, how this was a new way of life, all these different things that have come from different cultures and people, very busy area, and again, it just opens up to this social aspect. And I think this change, you can imagine being a local at this time and resisting these people, and then eventually the Romans taking hold, and you go out and you have a look at these towns, you're still a bit weary, and you're thinking, how strange is all this? So I think that's what I was thinking of when I was looking at this, how at first how strange this all would have been, and just getting to know. But like I said, the area we've got here, what is being found, it's been marked out. This would have been a lot larger inside, so there would have been more evidence of possibly living and pottery. It just makes you wonder as well. But when you have a look at this, this is providing some unique evidence, and a fantastic discussion of Roman Caerwent can be made from this. And looking at the National Museum of Wales, they've been fantastic with the evidence that they can provide. So this is 10 miles from Caerleon. Is between Newport and Chepstow, and is this central position in the South Wales coastal plain. So when we look at this, in the Roman days, this market town, which was surrounded by agricultural land, which would have provided ways of farming and growing crops, etc. This was fantastic. This was thought to be the marketplace of the Salers, which was the local people that was living there as well. So they benefited from this as well. And there was no military station here, and I think this was important, I think, to allow the local people to integrate into this, having this protection around there. And I think that was definitely to just further just stop any opposition, but also showing them that this is somewhere that they can take part in. And I think this is where we start to see this Romanization happen, because people are experiencing that. And I think it's not so much they were influenced heavily by the Romans. I think they just wanted a bit of Rome. And you definitely see how people take on different looks in terms of their clothing or the way that they do their house. It could be influenced by something that they might like, a time period that they like. So, for example, when I went to Belfast again, and we went to the Parliament there, they had these big pillars, and they looked Greek in the way that they were created. And I said, oh, isn't it quite interesting how the architecture could have this Greek look to it, to be a symbol of democracy? And I thought of that, and then my friend was going, oh no, they just probably like the look of it. It's very grand, it's very fun, beautiful, is making a statement. And I thought, yeah, some people might just have it for that reason, but I also think that it was more of a symbolic way of looking at it. But you see people bring things in terms of other cultures, maybe something from maybe an incense burner from somewhere else, say China, and they really like the look of it. Is bringing that aspect in because you like the look of that. And that's what I was thinking with these Roman aspects in local life. So you definitely see how this was thought to be what was the courthouse, which is something that's discussed a lot when you read books by Sarah Simmons. She really gives you an idea of what it was all looking like. And this was found at Pound Lane. Obviously, this is a recreation, but this is absolutely fantastic because we're finding evidence of mosaic floorings in workshops, and they even found that there was jars there that was stamped with the from the legionary workshops at Caerleon. So we have this connection as well, and they think that this building was important because it would had flagstones and the roof was supported by columns. You had this impressive entrance, and this door was just on Pound Lane. And this house was occupied until the 5th century, and they found 150 coins dating to around about 425 AD lying amongst the rubbish of the room that was used for smelting iron as well. So a lot have discussed this and how the coins have fallen from where they've been hidden in a loft to where the floors had fallen after the house fell to ruin. It's interesting, and you can definitely see this is open to the public. See if I can get an image. No, I didn't provide an image on this, so I'll try and show you an image here at the end. There was definitely some evidence here as well to suggest the way that people ate. So there was produce from the Mediterranean that they were able to find, such as lettuce and cucumber, cabbage and peas and pumpkins, herbs including rosemary, and tomatoes. At the time, tomatoes and potatoes were not found, so that was definitely something that we didn't see, which is something that a lot of people will possibly think of when they think of the Mediterranean. But it was a lot of things like cucumbers, cabbage, peas, and you can definitely see how this was another way of benefiting from that trade in the Mediterranean. Is all the different foods as well, the different types of foods, and I think a lot of people like trying new things. I think that's curiosity as well as humans. I know when I go out and I see something that I haven't eaten before, I think, oh, I might try that. I've eaten a lot of Greek foods, but there's Greek food, a shop that's opened on my street, and I can't wait to go and try that because the food smells lovely there. So I think, again, is this taste that they're literally having from the Mediterranean that they're able to experience. But they also found that there was possibly some evidence of lemons as well, which would have been new. And they also found that there was also evidence of other things, such as amphora from the Mediterranean, which would have carried possibly drink. But there was no other finds other than possibly some evidence to suggest that the amphora carried some drinks. There was some arguments of it being olive oil as well. But it was fantastic, I think, what is going on here, because it's a new way of life. This is where local people are benefiting from. And just reading all about this is just fantastic to see that they're able to provide a lot of information here for us that can tell you not just about the Romans, it's the local way of life. And I think one thing that frustrates me was that the way people sort of see the Romans compared to the Celts. I think there's a lot of understanding. I don't think that we were constantly at war. I think there was a time, definitely with what we're seeing here, where things settled down and we were able to have a look around and interact. And I think that was important for the way that we were able to expand our development and our skills and our connections as well. But just looking at this as well, you can see how this is a large area. A lot of people seem to think that there was evidence to suggest that there was 3,000 inhabitants here at the height of this town in the 2nd century, which would have been the 300s. Is it the 300s? No, it wasn't the 100s, wasn't it? Sorry. No, hang on. It is. What century are we in now? See, this is why Karl normally says the dates. This is why Karl normally says the dates. So now I've got myself confused. So we're in the 21st century.
Yeah.
So if it's a second, it's the 100s. Sorry about that. It is the 100s. I've had a bit of a brain fart. But this is why Karl, he did say this. Karl said that he's going to start, he always talks about the year rather than talking about the century, because it can be confusing. As easy as it is, sometimes you always think. Anyway, we carry on. So this would have been this civilized Roman town where you would have had townhouses, where you would have had this heating system. It's very cold here. And we do see examples of this heating system. They have found an underfloor channel to direct heat into a room as well. And it definitely would have been fantastic to see the temple and the public baths. But the heating system, I just think, is fantastic. It's almost like Caerwent is this miniature version of Rome in a way. But there wasn't any military presence there. So this is where a lot of people think that this town could have been entirely self-governing as well. But it was very slow to expand this town, and the population had hit its level at the 100s AD, but the town started to gradually decline then to the late 300s. And we definitely see how the basilica was used as a blacksmith's workshop, as many of the houses start to fall apart. And there is even evidence of a farmhouse then at the very end of this reign here as well. And that the hypocaust is right underneath the farmhouse. And obviously there's town walls, and I think that would have just provided extra protection as a boundary, isn't it? That would have provided some protection to the people. But this courthouse was absolutely fantastic to look at and even just get a sense of it, because you definitely see how this would have been absolutely fantastic. Imagine how interesting that would have been to look at. But we get to this part of it, and I think this is definitely a fantastic find as well. So these buildings that they found, obviously we can only find one layer of it, and you can see how fantastic the bricks are there, the dress stone. You can only imagine what it would have looked like. This would have been the open market, which would have had colonnaded walks. There were shading shops and offices, and you would have had taverns around the edge, and you'd have this paved central area that provided space for the market stalls. And it just makes you think, well, this is something that's really stayed with us, I think, because it just makes me think of whenever I go to town, there's always a pub in the corner, and there's offices, and there's obviously shops and places where you can go and eat. And this definitely would have been something of the excitement for an individual that's never experienced this as well, because your eyes would be thinking, wow, you would have stars in your eyes, because you'd be thinking, oh, we can provide so much from this. And you can see that they did that with the diet that we've been finding from the pollen analysis, etc., and even looking at the remains. It's fantastic how archaeologists can do that as well, because even looking at diet, I think it just gives us an aspect of what things would have looked like. But this basilica was one side of the forum, and it was huge. It was about 260 feet long and 182 feet wide, and it would have been used for civic events and ceremonial functions. So you have this mixture here as well. So there's two buildings. You would have had the market, where there's a lot of people bustling about, and then you would have had the basilica, where people come together for important things. And you definitely see how, I think you could see how this is a new chapter in terms of how there's dwarf buildings on the sides surrounding the buildings, and they're around about 65 feet high. And either end of the main basilica hall, you can see small chambers that would have been used by magistrates for hearing court cases. And I think that's quite interesting, that we're having this evidence of government, really, where we're having someone deal with the issues in society and try and keep the peace. And I think that would have been important in a time like this as well. If you're having so much resistance from a local group, eventually I think you are going to try and listen to them. And I think that would benefit with trade as well. It's almost like there's compromises from both sides. And this is why you see how this is interesting, because a lot of people have found information to suggest that this was having no military presence, but you have someone dealing with court cases. And I think that just shows to me what this town was like. It's a different way of dealing with things. But this is a significant discovery, and this is lying behind a farm that's already existing. It was explored in 1908 and 1909, but there has been later examinations of this site. And you would have had this monumental archway in the entrance. And like I said, this is where a lot of the town's issues and decisions were being held here. And there would have been wooden benches that no longer belong there, because obviously wood's not going to stay there for long. But this would have had a lot of hearings and even mosaics covering the floor. And there was quite a few alterations being made in the late 200s, but they even found evidence to suggest that this would have been something that they maintained for a few years. This was something that was a pride. in the area, but there was also evidence of a shrine in the council chamber as well. So this sense of worship is still being part of this, but it would have had Corinthian columns as well that would have reached the height of 30 feet. And you would have seen how this was massive. There would have been great big slabs on the floor, and it was just the alterations, which is quite interesting here, is the fact that they have this interest to preserve it and maintain it. But the coins that were found there as well were dated from 390 AD, so we suggest that this area continued for much longer than what they originally thought. Like I said, the marketplace was fantastic as well, which was not far from it. It would have had a courtyard in the middle, but this was found to have personal items as well, such as tweezers and nail cleaners and ear scrapers that was found inside the rubble of the shop, was because the wooden floorboards had fallen. But they even found, that was just in one shop, they even found gaming counters in one shop. They were able to find evidence of a road that would have gone there as well. So this was definitely important. It was also supported by great big columns. And it's definitely interesting to look at all that. But when we get to the temple as well, this is something that's quite interesting. The temple, I think, gives us a glimpse of the beliefs of the town in this period, and what they believe, what they had a shrine to. So there was a shrine there, and there was to a deity that was being worshipped, but it was not known who the deity was. Not many people have access to this deity, and the worshippers would have stood in the sacred grounds to watch the ceremonies. But this shrine that they have was something that was important. A lot of people have found that talk about a find such as this iron finger ring with a face of a child and a small circular boss with a face of Medusa has been found in a wooden box as a ritual object on the site, and it was thought to be worn by men and women. But what I thought interesting about Medusa is that that Roman aspect to it there, because I've heard a lot of discussions about Medusa in the Roman period and what that means. And is also Medusa has a different meaning to what we know now. It's thought that she was able to turn people to stone and look that way, because Poseidon slept with her without her permission, and Athena actually was really angry, so she wanted to give her this power to actually get back at these men that would have these lustful looks. And it's thought to be this sign of empowerment and also safety as well. So maybe that's why they have this all these different, because what I'm getting a sense here is these female deities. You have the mother goddess there, which I've provided an image of, that's been found on this site. So again, it's almost like the local people have said, well, the mother goddess here is something that's important to us, and then you've got the Roman people who've gone, well, we have Medusa because she's this protecting, empowering symbol, and it's almost like they've come together. And I think it's definitely shown how there's this different time. And I think when people look at the past, and you definitely think how a lot of people seem to think that progress is linear, and it would have been much worse. Women were definitely shunned. It didn't have these great big meanings behind them. But I think when you look at the past, they did have an appreciation for women in some sort of sense, and they were able to have the characteristics of being protective and being important, just like these male deities, because they also had some sort of importance. And I think it's interesting because it's almost like you have this Romano-British twist on the worship, where two groups of people have collided and created this society. So you definitely see how Mother Goddess holding a fruit or possibly a small tree in her hands. I'm not sure whether you can see that properly, but it looks like she's seated as well. It's thought that this mother goddess is thought to represent fertility, and maybe that's why it was in the temple. A lot of people have got a lot of discussions about this and what this would mean as well. But it's fantastic that we found this little find here of the mother goddess, because I think it's just fantastic. It's almost like this was providing shelter for ritual purposes. It didn't matter what your beliefs were. It was almost like it was inclusive. And this is thought to be one of the deities in the shrine, along with Medusa as well. So I do like the aspect of this as well, how where worshippers would gather and have their own mark. So it's almost like they weren't completely Romanized. They tried to influence Romans as much as they influenced us. And I think it worked quite beautifully, really, when you look at that in terms of the archaeology. And I thought this was another fantastic find in all of this. Looking at my book, there's definitely better ways of showing you these finds, because they're beautiful. They would have been really dark blues, dark reds, yellows, whites. And this mosaic was almost like it was trying to tell us another side of the story. So this was found in one of the houses. This is telling us a story of wealth. I think this is telling us a story of how great this was, and I think how appreciated. If we're having Romans living alongside the local people, maybe the local people helped, and maybe this is where they were able to understand how mosaics were made and how there was a different art. Maybe this is the way the local people were able to know about the Roman stories and myths as well. So when archaeologists were having a look at this plot, it was in this large area where they found complete mosaics, and they were in original place of this family's dining room that was living there. This was a major find because it had this light blue and pale grey with red and yellow and white strands that revealed a gigantic pattern that would have given us a story, where they have patterns of squares inside circles of animals, and you have these heads that are representing the 4 seasons, and you definitely see how there's this knotwork as well being represented in here, and it does make you think whether this was a local individual having an influence on this, because it's not entirely Roman. But it's definitely interesting to see all the seasons represented. I think is a nice way of telling it. But you definitely see how there's different individuals being here. That we have winter being shown in this purple brown cloak with her shoulders showing, and we definitely see how spring has this red flower on her chest. How the representation of autumn is sadly lost, which is a shame, because I'm an autumn baby. I would have loved to known what that would have looked like. But there's also cupids all around the aspects of it as well. So it's definitely interesting how we aren't able to know much, but we're able to find some. And this would have been a fantastic place to have food, I think, and to even marvel and even just have an aspect of this. So definitely fantastic, definitely a beautiful find as well. These finds I thought were quite interesting. So one of them is a painting of a young woman on wall plaster that was found in house 2. And this was definitely fantastic because obviously there's not much known about the rest of this painting, but you can see how fantastic it was, and the features of it, the individual looks Romanesque in some sort of way, and you could just only imagine what this would have looked like. This would have been painted on someone's wall, and this portrait of a young woman on this wall plaster would have possibly been someone who's important, or maybe the owner that commissioned this to have this on their wall. And I love the fact that things like this survive, because it's just a glimpse of the skill of the individuals here. And the other one is a an altar that's dedicated to Mars and an oculus that was found in one of the houses is now in St. Stephen's Church. But it's definitely fantastic, because when you look at this, there's evidence of worship being important to this. Oculus was this Celtic or local equivalent of this war god. So you see in this mixture here with this way of life, it's almost like an intermarrying of both cultures, and have come out with this, and I think it's fantastic. And I think it's beautiful as well, because they did find in this house evidence of this being an enormous property, but they were able to find a large portion of bone, which is thought to be from a whale. So this whale skeleton was found in part of this house, and the rest of the remains is a mystery, because this was just surprising to find right next to this pillar here as well. But this pillar was absolutely fantastic. It was located by Pound Lane, where there was also some evidence of shops. But the painting of the woman herself, it just makes you want to know who was she and what was the story about all of this. But this was just part of one of the other plots. There's thought to be a building that appeared to be part of a house. There's not really much information about it, but they said that you can just see the remains of the property that was left behind. And I definitely think how this was a way they were able to connect and mix together was through their worship and teach each other different things as well. So I thought it was quite interesting. I know a lot about Caerwent, but looking at this, it was just definitely fantastic and interesting to see. I just wanted, obviously, in true me fashion, I wanted to link it back to the Normans, and I did mention a bit of this earlier today, but the Normans, for me, you see evidence of them targeting these Roman sites. We see it with Cardiff Castle with the Norman keep, and you have this evidence of a Roman structure. And it made me think of how they understood that the Romans had placed that there for strategic importance, and maybe that was something to take over. And definitely it would be easier to take over a structure that was possibly crumbling a little bit, but we could use less resources to fix it up and be up and running in no time. And I think it's almost the last time that we saw someone that was really really sort of strong in their presence in Britain was with the Romans. So I think the Normans wanted to also embody that. So we definitely see how near the Roman wall, which we can see on the right side of that mound there was an evidence of a motte and bailey that was there as well, almost like the earlier ones that we see with Cardiff Castle as well. But I think this is a way of establishing power on the people of Britain and showing them who they were. It's almost like they mimic the Romans and where they decide to put things and do it their own way. So I think what we see here is Caerwent is an important centre for the Roman era, but not for the military, for domestic way of life, for trading, for making connections with other people. And so the locals benefited from this area, and it provided a better way of communication, of trading. And the Romans were able to allow them to have an influence on the local people as much as the local people had an influence on the Romans. And you see how this did this stayed with the culture of the locals, but they did almost go back to their old way of life, or they would have stayed in those hill forts, but and carried on after the Roman era. But I definitely think how the Roman era provided a twist, and how these structures that were left behind were possibly used in some sort of way. Because I can't see why after the Romans left you would leave central heating from underneath the ground when everything's cold. I'm sure you'd want to quickly run back in there sometimes to warm up. So I think this is definitely an interesting area, and seeing the paintings and the pottery, and there's a lot of Samian pottery that's being found there with a lot of detail. I think what we're seeing here is that this is a thriving, wealthy area, and definitely something to have attention on, and hopefully hope that there's more to be found. So if I stop sharing, then I'll ask if there's any questions. So Anne, is there anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Is that mosaic in Newport Museum, or
And you can
Where
have
is
the image of it is on the People's Collection online, so I can send it to you. I think they've just got images of it. I think, let me have a look at where the book is. I think it is being held, a lot of the evidence is being held by the Newport Museum. So that the painting of the woman was, the image that is held, they just said that the section of the Four Seasons. So if I can find out where it was for you, and I can get back to you if you want. But I think that a lot of things are coming from the Newport Museum in terms of looking at Caerwent, which is fantastic to see that they're holding so much information that you can have a look at, and it's just available for people to have a gander, which I think is fantastic. Because in the whole book, Caerwent has got two of their finds. So you have the Celtic woman, and you obviously have the painting. But this was from Carnarvon here as well. So definitely fantastic to look at that in Caerwent. But is there anything else you'd like to ask or add, Anne?
It sort of reminded me of Chester in a way, you know.
Yeah.
Looking at that, we went in to look at the baths, you know, and remember that area, which was just off the town centre, really.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a shame that Killian and Caerwent are so far out from Newport, the actual, you know, hub really of it's just that, you know, I think it's very disconnected, you know, because we had the Iron Age fort in the Gaia, and then of course the early church was in probably just after the Roman era, but there's fantastic, you know, evidence in Caerwent, you know, and it'd be so nice to walk past that every day, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Walk past it more often, you know, than you can. You have to go to a special sort of place, but then it's being protected, I suppose, you know.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic evidence. It's really.
Yeah, you can obviously go and see the remains and go there in the ground, but I think it's obviously it's not as simple to get there sometimes as well. Obviously, for me, it's not down the road. But I think we're definitely seeing how there's evidence of possibly, because there's someone I know, and they're very against Romans, don't like talking about them, and they were like, they really did ruin us. And I think there was resistance from both sides, but I think what we're seeing here is that maybe there was this harmony at one point where we were benefiting from them just as much as they were benefiting from us. And that's not a hard thing to look at. We definitely see that with the Vikings. I'm sure we didn't have a great start with them. It just sometimes it makes me think that the best friendships start off like that. My best friends, I didn't like them when we first started being friends. We were quite young. I remember when we were doing work experience in year 10, bickering at each other. And now he's my best friend, and he's taught me things as much as I've taught him things. And I think that's what you've got to look at it like, because you wouldn't have the mother goddess next to Medusa if they weren't talking.
That's really interesting, because, you know, depending on what time it was found, I mean, you know, Christianity came with the Romans, you know, probably more towards the end of the 300s, maybe 400s, you know, I don't know, that sort of time.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a period when they hadn't quite taken on, you know, Mary, you know.
Yeah.
And so but Mary is a mother goddess, you know, to us, I think. You know, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's just a, you know, sort of different story, you know, a different.
Yeah,
story.
I think with anything like that is how you look at it. I know a lot of people look at the medieval period. They used to look at Jesus as a mother and put into a mother role, and I think that was where they were trying to. Definitely was a time where they were trying to tell women that they could join this life of worship and being on this higher level, and relating to them.
And they were
them as a mother,
important.
who they tried to relate to at the time. Is
Yeah.
So thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
Richard, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Oh, just, you sort of think, a lot of people seem to think, oh, well, the Romans weren't here that long, we have 400 years.
Yeah.
And, I think years ago, sort of in school and things, you were hardly taught anything about the Romans in Wales.
No.
All you hear about is the bit of wall in Cardiff Castle and Caerleon, and that was about it. But over the years, things have, like all down the Vale and everything, all the Romano-British.
Bombston,
there's a lot more sort of seem to be around and more publicised than what it was, when I was
and I think
school.
It's definitely opening our perspective and our eyes, I think, to what I think is bringing the local people into it now. It's rather than looking at these military legionary fortresses. And I think that looking at our school, I think the schools normally go for that great man example, where they might look at this great, fantastic legionary fortress and how the Romans were the most ruling thing. And it does just frustrate you, and as you get older you have this different perspective presented to you, where you think, oh, what about the local people, and how did they integrate with each other, and how did they have an effect on the Romans as much as they did us? And you're right, Richard, over the past few years we're starting to find that there's more evidence to suggest that we did get along in some sort of way and have an effect on each other, and the Romano-British evidence is fantastic to look at. And even down to horrible histories. I know I go on about it sometimes, but I had the box set for Christmas, and looking at the newest episodes, they've actually updated all their knowledge in terms of this already in that one series of series 6, where they talk about the locals and how they were able to live life, and how they didn't just go into Roman towns, that they had their own their own hill forts as well. So it's interesting to look at that, and definitely Carl's brought to light some evidence of these rectangular buildings in these hill forts, and how this was evidence to suggest that the local people wanted a bit of Rome with them in some sort of way. It's definitely interesting to look at the recent stuff as well. So thank you, Richard. And Pat, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
Well, I've been there about 3 times, and it's really amazing. The saddest bit is when we looked on the wall and there were some paintings there, and they were being gradually destroyed.
Oh no!
They weren't covered or protected or anything. This was, about 10 years ago. You'll see a little bit of a painting, but it's just been washed away.
Oh, and it's not great conditions here, is it, with the rain either? It just makes you think, oh, that's awful.
And, the leaves and everything.
We need to protect them more, don't we? Some sort of, we do.
Like, I understand the need to want to leave there so people can experience it, but I think in some sort of way you have to protect it. Pompeii, for example, they have the graffiti on the walls, and they've actually put a covering over it, so you can't actually destroy it or anything natural. And I think maybe that's what should have been done with a lot of these sites, to protect them.
And all the churches where the medieval paintings were all painted over. There's so much we could uncover as well. It's been lost. But, it's great what we got though, and they are starting to recover more and more. So we'll have a better picture.
Definitely online is fantastic for images, but it seems like the Newport Museum is the place to go in terms of the finds here for this.
I found, because I'd lived in Newport, is my hometown. I found that going to Cardiff then and looking in their museum, they didn't have as much as Newport had, or more, as accurate information, But,
I find what is quite interesting for Cardiff is that a lot of their archaeological archives and anything like that, like Newport might have, it's all in Catay's library, which I know seems really ditzy of me, but that would have not been my first port of call when I was researching.
Is that the archives or the actual?
Yeah, it's. I think it's the actual artifacts as well. It is a big building, and I know they do a lot of family history. So they have an evening every week where people do their family tree for free. So which I think is fantastic. And I did think why did they have so much interest in history was because they have stuff there. But it wasn't on my port of call to go there until quite recently. So. You learn something new every day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think my daughter used to go there to, I don't know what she did there. She's supposed to go to Glamorgan Archives, but she went to Catay's library quite a few times.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's just weirdly placed because it's right next to a cemetery, a very big one as well.
Oh, yeah, and you can go on tours of the cemetery, can't you?
Yeah,
well, I used to be able to.
Anyway, thank you everyone. Thank you for being great, and I'll see you tomorrow, Anne.
I'll try and come along tomorrow.
Oh yes, I forgot.
I'm having my hand done. It depends if I can drive afterwards. You know.
Yeah. Good luck, Anne.
We've got to talk about. I know it's online now, so but speak to you by text or something.
Okay, Anne. That's perfect.
Tomorrow,
that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
I'll start. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Please give Carl a like and a follow. And he's come on now if he wants to say anything concluding.
Hiya. Yes, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll end the live stream.